Hey guys, lifts. First thing we got to cover. Well, welcome. All right, so as technicians, this is one of those things that we do all the time. We do it 10 times a day, 20 times a day. It can get pretty easy to get lax about this stuff. I've seen uh, quite a few times seasoned master type technicians doing this, doing it wrong, not paying attention, losing focus on what they're doing, and getting hurt. So I kind of make a big deal about this, and I'm going to show you the right way to do it. And then there's also the wrong way to do it, and we'll talk about that some too. Okay? All right, so if you need to fix something underneath your car, what are you going to do? Well, if you're in your shop environment, you use lift. If you're not in a shop environment, well, you use jack stands and a floor jack. And we'll talk about those too. Safety comes first. Like I said, in my opinion, this is one of the most dangerous things we do. Because we do it all the time, it's easy to get distracted while doing it. It's so easy. I've seen it happen. Anyways, there's all kinds of warnings on this stuff. If you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing this. This one over here, this is, no customers allowed in the service area. Some people seem to think that this is, insurance related. And honestly, it's not really. It's a safety issue. They're not used to being in a working shop. Most people don't know how to act around a working shop and be safe. Floors can get slippery. Things can fall. Heck, you can whack your head pretty hard. I've got the scars to prove it. But anybody ever wants to look, I'll show you them. Are there different types of lifts? Yeah, there's hundreds of different types of lifts. There's four-post drive-on. These are pretty nice. If you're doing alignments and stuff, this is pretty common. Maybe doing wheels. But, honestly, this is more of a home garage thing, in my opinion, or specialty stuff. It does limit the access to the underside of the car. These rails get in the way. We also got these large portables. I've used these before to lift big trucks and semis and, CTA buses. You put 4, 5, 4, 6, 8 of them together, and it lifts it on the wheels. And they're just interconnected electrically. So you plug these cables in, and then, there's up and down buttons that make them all operate at the same time. These are pretty common in the big vehicle industry. Drive-on scissor lifts. These are really common. We have some. They're mainly used for alignment racks. Now they also have what's called a trolley jack on them. So not only can I lift the whole car up by the tires, but I've also got these trolley jacks that can lift the vehicle off of the ramp in order to work on, in order to align it, in order to do stuff. We also have these fold-down leveling legs. When you put the lift up, and when you drop it back down on these are specifically set so that this platform, the car sits exactly level. Frame contact scissor lifts, common, doing brakes, body shops. It's common to have these in here due to the increase in floor space, and it allows you to put them at working heights pretty easily. If you're working on a rocker panel in a body shop kind of thing. Twin post electric, probably the most common type at this point. We have a bunch of these outside. It's asymmetrical, which means these two lift arms are different lengths. Shorter ones in the front, longer ones in the back. Really common. So how do I operate a lift? Usually they're pretty simple. It's just a couple of buttons. I got a button that, lifts up the car. Talked about it when we were in the shop last week. Lifts up the car. I got another one that lowers the car. Now, lowers the car. This one lowers the car. This is actually a lock. So when the car goes up, we drop it down so that it's sitting on the locks. It's a mechanical lock. So it's not, tied into the hydraulics that actually lift the car. Some of them look a little different, but they're all pretty much the same. Got an up button, got a down handle, and then we've got a lock button. Sometimes there's a lock on each side. Sometimes there's a lock on just one side. Different ways they do it. Also, a lot of these guys have a safety bar on them. And what this is a contact bar. So if you lift the car too high, it hits this and it shuts the lift off. Got to be careful with these. You really don't want to hit them because they can get jammed. And then it's a huge pain to get a stick and try to whack them back. Anyways, positioning. This is probably the most difficult part to get students to realize how this works. So we're going to spend some time positioning cars. It should be as straight as possible and evenly spaced between the uprights, between the posts, between the goal posts. Your goal is to get it straight in there and have just about the same amount of room on one side as you do the other. Now, different cars, sometimes this can be really difficult. If I space the car out to one side, that means these arms have to be over longer, and you may not hit your marks underneath the car where your lift points. A lot of times you have to look up the year of the car. So how do you know the year of the car? Well, you can go by the 10th digit, or you can go by the placard in the door, or you can go by the placard underneath the hood. Those will all give you the year. So you need year, make, and model, and you can go look it up. We have lift guides attached to every lift. Anyways, or you can look them up in our database. So where do I put the lift arms? Well, this is where it gets a little more complicated. Depending on what type of lift arms you have. Some are axle, so literally it lifts up on the control arm. This would be like a trolley jack that we're using on the alignment racks. This is really old school. We had wheel lifts, those were pretty easy. You put the rear tires in it. If we have a full frame vehicle or a partial frame vehicle, these are much easier. This would be a picture. There's a K-frame up in front on a lot of cars, okay? And then there's the axle or rear trailing arm suspension in the back. So sometimes you can put it right here in the midst of this, in the middle of this bar that connects the left and right rear tires, but sometimes that's not strong enough to lift the car, and you try to lift it there, you're just gonna dome that thing up. You're gonna peak it up, and that's gonna bring the tires in. It's gonna throw off the alignment, mess up the tires. Can't fix it. Gonna have to replace it. Lots of money. Usually anywhere on this K-frame is usually pretty good. I'm usually shooting for these bolts right here that bolt it in. So you got this big mass of metal right here, and then there's the mounting bolts. That's what I'm usually shooting for, and same thing with a floor jack. I'm shooting for this bar right here if I can get away with it. If not, control arms, and if not that, then I'm up here like on the pinch welds, but that's my last resort. Most vehicles, you don't have to put it there. Some you do, and usually they're marked. We'll talk about pinch welds in a second. So if we're looking at a frame contact lift, here's the big piece of metal, the frame that comes down. I'm just going to put the little pad right on the frame. I got to be careful that there's nothing above it. Okay, I have to be gentle with this, and then the same thing in back. So some frames are U-shaped. So we got this U-shaped, although honestly I think it's a C myself. I want to put the lift pad here underneath this vertical wall. I don't want to be out here because I can literally fold that lip over, which would be bad. So I want to make sure that I'm on the outside of the C channel or U channel. Watch out for this. Like this guy, he lifted up the car and he's actually on the exhaust. He is not on the frame rail. See it? Here's the frame rail. Here's the exhaust that comes down. So he's literally lifting the car up on this little corner of the exhaust, on this little corner of the pad. That would be wrong. Okay, we got to watch out while we're in there. fuel lines, brake lines, wiring harness, make sure those don't get pitched and those are out of the way, because that can be very expensive to fix. So look, here's a nice big, see, if you look at it, here's a nice big chunk of frame, okay? Nice, thick, heavy piece of metal. And if we look out here, this is our pinch weld, and you could see where it's pinch welded in. You can see the welds. This is just one piece of steel here. You lift it on this, you're going to crush this, and that would make customers really angry, along with your boss and your teacher, by the way. Okay, so we got to watch out for where our lift points are. Unibody construction. This is by far the most common. So there's no big full frame that runs back and forth across the back. Although the lift points for this K-frame, which is my main engine transmission mount, this guy is usually okay. And if it has a crossbar like this, that's a good place to lift too with a floor jack. But you got to be really careful. Some of these guys have a bar in here, but it doesn't have any structure to it. And literally the radiator lives right up on top of it. So if you try to lift on that bar, like with a floor jack, you just gotta bend that thing up. It's gonna just cave the radiator in, and that would be bad. So let's not do that. I'm watching you on this. Okay? In the back, sometimes the back can get rather complicated. You know, like this has got a panhard bar across the back. This would not be a good place to lift it. Now, can you lift it on this bar right here? Well, on some cars you can, if it's big and thick and heavy enough, but a lot of cars aren't anymore. They're trying to shave weight wherever they can. So you might be up here underneath, this is where the shock absorber is, you know, the rear strut or the rear shock and spring assembly. That's usually a good place to go. You know, that's a good place to go. And again, if we have to, we can be in the pinch welds, but I'm going to be on you. If there's a better place to do it, I'm not going to allow that. So here's my pinch welds. Now you can see on this car that they've been damaged a few times. This is a shop car. It's been, you know, hung by the pinch welds a bazillion times. But if you look just a little further back, there's a big frame member back there. That would be a better place. Now, if you are going to rack on the pinch welds, okay, here's how to do it right. You turn the pad out sideways to distribute the weight as much as you can. See these little two notches right here? That's actually where the factory jack goes. Okay? That's usually a good indication of where you can rack one of these pieces. Okay? See it? We're on the pinch weld itself. We're not out here on the rocker panel, because this isn't big enough. And a lot of times these things are plastic. So you got to be gentle with them. So lots of spider webs. So on the subframe. Now here's my big, I think that is, oh no. Here's my, here's a big heavy duty body mount. Okay? This would be a good spot. But this is a good spot. You can tell it's a good spot because see the multiple pieces of metal coming together that are welded in place? This is a structural heavy-duty part. I can lift on this thing. Get it? So this is the front up here on this vehicle. So this is a big piece of front subframe or stub frame, sometimes they're called. So what happens if I need to raise the cleats? Now, these things get taller. Why would I need to do that? Well, if I'm going, you know, like if it's a truck and has like running boards, or I've got some type of a, you know, obstruction in the way of the arms. When I raise up the arms are contacting the body before the pads are contacting the frame. I'm going to need to raise these cleats. Now, if you look at this, they actually flip up, okay? But I want them to flip up in two different directions, because if they flip up the same way, it's real easy to push the thing over. Can you see? Get it? Get it? Get it? So if you're going to raise these things, they should be raised in different directions. Understand? Not this way. This would be bad. Because the car can fall. It's pretty easy. Okay, so what keeps the arms from moving once I set them up? Well, there's a pivot lock. Okay, and you can see these things. See these pins? You pull these pins up, and there's like a gear that engages and disengages. So before I lift the car, I'm looking at, I'm going to put it up like a foot, 6 inches, and I'm going to check and make sure my pins are in place to keep my arms locked. Because you don't want those arms unlocked. Now, and it's also really common that, like when you put the lift down, like a nut or a bolt or something gets caught underneath here, and it doesn't allow the arms to unlock. It can be a huge pain to get these things unlocked when there's a weight of a car on it. Ask me how I know. Okay, so these are not engaged. All the way down, pushes up on this pin, raises this little locking paw, gear, or whatever you want to call it, that allows the arms to swing back and forth. Okay, so what if I do all this and the lift still isn't stable on the lift? Well, you should re-rack it. But there are times where I need to remove a whole bunch of weight from the vehicle, and I'm worried that the car might become unstable due to center of gravity shift. This is where the high-rise lift support comes in handy. Here's the key. We put this underneath the car, and we raise this thing, we spin it out, and I'll show you them in the lab. You spin it out to support the vehicle. Okay? You don't lower the vehicle onto these. Also, I've seen people do this, so you got to watch it. You can put enough force on this guy, and it's pretty easy to do, to actually lift the car up off of the pad. So you got the lift arm, you start screwing this guy up, and you actually lift the car off the pad, which becomes an extremely dangerous position to be in. Okay? These things are used, but you got to be careful when you're using them. Anyways, so what if you don't have a lift? Well, then we're down to working on a floor jack and jack stands, and FYI, a pizza box works great to lay on. My suggestion is when you see somebody throwing away carpet with the pad attached, grab a chunk. Grab like a 6-foot chunk. I've worked on those things for years. Gives you some insulation, gives you some padding. It's kind of nice. Look for shag. If you drop something, it doesn't roll away from you. Carpet. All the pizza boxes, I bet. All right, so floor jacks, jack stands. Here's my jack stands. I raise up the car, okay, and then I place the jack stands underneath it before I get underneath it. I mean, I do have to reach underneath it in order to do this, but yes, it's nice when you get like the whole rear of the car up with one jack, jack it up in the middle, the whole back comes up, put 2 jack stands underneath it. They should be, you try to make them the same height. Okay? So if you look at this one, he's on the front K-frame, the front of the K-frame. You need to be careful not to jack it up. It may or may not have one here. And you want to be really careful not to be jacking it up on this one, because this is the one that the radiator is up above. This is the one you got to watch. Anyways. So, safety directions: don't damage the vehicle, don't damage yourself, don't get hurt. This is dangerous. People can die. Be careful. Be gentle. That's about it. We'll talk more in the classroom about placement, front and back, because there's a couple things I got to describe, but pretty simple, okay?